Assalamu alaikum students. Open your books at page 222. It is unit 10 and the title of the unit is Journeys. So we are going to start autobiographical writings. Before we start the lesson, I must tell you what does autobiography means. It is actually a story of a person's life as told by the person. And the subject of the story is also the author. So we are going to start from the first one, which is crossing the river. The events described in the text below, crossing the river, took place in Russia nearly 200 years ago. The family servants were bringing the writer Serge home from school for the summer holidays in a horse-drawn carriage. At the time, Serge was just 9 years old. We came in the afternoon to the bank of the Kama River opposite the village where the river was crossed during the summer. On the bank there were 3 loaded carts with their drivers waiting to cross, and group of peasants with baskets, peasants are the farmers, with baskets full of berries which they were carrying home to the village. No ferryman. Ferryman is a person who rows the boat. No ferryman was to be seen. After some discussion, the peasants and my servants decided to take us across themselves. One of the peasants said he had been a ferryman for some years and offered to take the steering oar. Well, class 6, in these lines, we have learned that the events which are described in crossing the river, they took place in Russia around 200 years ago. Serge, who is protagonist or the writer of the story, he was taken home for summer vacations by family servants in a horse-drawn carriage. Serge was 9 years old at that time. Writer says that they came to the bank of the river Kama to cross it. There were 3 loaded carts with their drivers, and a group of peasants with their baskets were also there. They wanted to cross the river, but there was no ferryman, so one of the peasants offered the services of ferryman. Move toward the text again. They picked out the best ferry boat and the 3 carts with the horses. My carriage and 3 horses and the women with their baskets were all put on board. The man who said he was a ferryman took his place at the steering oar. The peasants and my servant Ivan, whose courage and strength made him worth 10 men, took the other oars. Although the crossing place was directly opposite the village, it was necessary to row upstream for more than a verst. Verst is a distance of around 1 kilometer. Before turning across the river, this would prevent the boat from being carried down past and landing place on the other side of the current of the angry Kama River. Well, in this paragraph, we have learned that they decided to take the best boat. They boarded 3 carts with their horses, riders, carriage, and 3 horses, and some women with their baskets. Serge's servant Ivan was a very strong man. He took the oars to help the person in rowing. A black cloud was rising quickly and covering the horizon, but the boat was moving very slowly. To save time, as the storm came nearer, the men rowed only some of the necessary distance upstream. Then they murmured. Murmured means when you utter few words in a very low voice. A quick prayer and began to row straight across. But before we had reached the middle of the river, the heaven grew black, the reflection of the water still blacker, and the storm broke over us with thunder and lightning and the hurricane of wind. Our steersman dropped his oars in a panic and confessed he was not a ferryman at all and could not steer. The women raised a piercing shriek, and horror fell upon us. I was so frightened that I trembled and could not utter a sound. Well, as boat was rowing very slowly, suddenly they saw that black clouds were covering the sky before they could reach the middle of the river. A storm broke over their heads. The peasant who was rowing the boat, he dropped his oars in panic and admitted that he was not a ferryman, and he couldn't steer the boat. Serge was also frightened, so he began to tremble with fear. The currents carried us down several versts, means kilometers, and then stranded. Stranded means being left somewhere in remote area. Stranded us on a sandbank about 100 yards from the shore. Ivan sprang into the chest-high water. He made the quietest of our horses jump off, mounted me on it, and told me to hang on to the horse neck and mane. Mane is the kind of long hairs which are grown on the horse neck. Then he led the horse by the bridle, with great waves of discolored water surging past us. Suddenly, Ivan disappeared into deep water, and my horse began to swim. A fear of death, which then came over me, I have never forgotten. I was almost choked. Choked means when you have a feeling of suffocation by the waves. But Ivan was a strong swimmer, and he swam on to the shallows, never letting go of the horse bridle until he brought us safely to the bank. I was taken off the horse, almost unconscious and wet to the skin. My fingers stiffened from clinging means stinging, to the mane. But I soon recovered and was inexpressibly happy to find everyone safe. Well, in these lines we have came across that the strong currents of water took them all to several kilometers, then stranded them on sandbank, which was about 100 yards away from the shore. Ivan, who was writer's servant, he jumped into deep water and mounted the author on horseback, which had already jumped into the deep water. And he asked Serge to grip the neck and the mane of the horse tightly. He led the horse by bridle through currents of water. He had to swim for quite a distance, but he never let go of the bridle until he brought them safely to the bank. Ivan was a strong, brave man. Serge was nearly unconscious when he was taken off the horse. His fingers were stiff from gripping the mane tightly for a long time. Serge felt terribly frightened during this ordeal. When he was finally brought to the river bank, he found everyone safe, and he was very, very happy to see everyone safe. So the lesson is done. Now turn the page. Come to page number 225. Here we have some questions which we have to do on the copy, and we will do question number 1, 2, 5 and 8. You have to write down it in your copy. I'm going to read them for you. First question: who was waiting to cross the river and why they were waiting? The answer is 3 loaded carts with drivers, some peasants, and author with his servant were waiting to cross the river. They were waiting as there was no ferryman to row the boat. Question number 2: why was the peasant who offered to take the steering oar trusted? Answer is because there was no ferryman and they did not know that he was lying, as they wanted to go across. As I have told that we will do question number 5 and 8, so it is question number 5. What happened before they reached the middle of the river? Before they reached the middle of the river, a storm broke over their heads. Question number 8: why were Serge's fingers stiff? Answer is Serge's fingers were stiff from gripping the mane tightly for a long time. Lesson is done.